Hello guys, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar session. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Julia Skulskaya. I'm QA Turbo School representative. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, our webinar is dedicated to iOS automation testing, and I know that our guest has prepared a bonus for all participants who stay until the end of this session. So I encourage all of you to be active, stay until the end, do not hesitate to ask questions, and we promise you'll get a special bonus from us. Now, let me introduce our guest, Maksim Akifev, Senior Product Manager. Also, as you can see, Maksim has a blog at medium.com/@Akifev. And I'm gonna turn his camera just in a moment. Let me find you. Okay, Maksim. Maksim, hello. Maksim?
Yeah,
Hey,
how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for coming. I'm very happy to see you here. We appreciate it. Thank you. So Maksim, I'm pretty sure that everyone wants to learn more about you. So just tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, your experience. We are very curious.
Sure. So I started to work in the QA field about 6 years ago. I started as a manual tester, and then I started to transition into a more automation and leading role. So I've joined it my next company, which was my second job, Connexint, where I've been leading our QA team, and we've been able to build a mobile automation for iOS and Android. It was my first time when I started to use Appium and Ruby to automate manual tasks. Then I transitioned it to fintech company where I worked as a software engineer and test, working closely with developers to ensure that we have proper integration, unit tests, and as well as end-to-end tests written in Selenium, Appium, and some other tools. And then I started to work for cybersecurity company where I've also been leading our QA team. And like 6 months ago, I've transitioned to the product management role, which I found more exciting. But at this time, I'm still, doing a lot in the QA.
Maksim, I love your background. This is perfect choice.
It's not a background, by the way.
It looks amazing. So you mentioned you love being a manager, right? It's a lot of responsibilities, right? How do you feel about it? Being in charge of people.
For me, I'm a product manager, so I'm not just in charge of people. I'm more in charge of the product. So for me, working in a QA, it's been always a balance. Like you test according to requirements, but every tester finds himself in a situation when requirements doesn't make sense at some degree. So I just passionate to build a good products. That's why transition to product management was kind of smooth to me. Like I still have the same mission. I just want to have a good product and make sure that we build it.
Sounds good. Why did you decide, to be a mobile tester? Why mobile testing in general?
It's a good question. I'd say that it was easier for me to find a job initially, because if you look in the market, like there are a lot of good professionals, like web testing, maybe like in Windows testing and other like older platforms. Like back in the days, iOS and Android were relatively new, and there were really few mobile testers, and specifically there were not too many automation testers.
Okay. And what kind of automated tools have you ever used?
I've started with Appium, which I would say is the most common, which people are using those days. It's been working pretty well, but then when I started to work as a software engineer and test and working closely with developers, I had to write XCUI, which actually we're going to cover in this webinar. Those tests for iOS applications. Then I started to work with Espresso as well to write tests for Android applications. Selenium, of course, for web testing. And now I've been using Appium again. But I'd say for me, all common tools I've been using pretty much. There were some experiments with others, but I still love Appium the most.
Yeah, it looks like you have lots of experience, and we are so excited to learn from you. So I'm pretty sure that we can start. I see all participants are here, and Maxim, I wish you good luck. Again, thank you very much for coming, and now you're gonna be in charge of this webinar. Okay.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, give me one moment to share my screen.
Sure. And I know that more people are coming and connecting. Just guys, if you're gonna have questions, do not hesitate to ask them. And Maxim will answer your questions during his presentation, or we will answer them at the end. So we promise we won't left any questions without answers.
All right, so let's get started.
Sure. Good luck.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about XCUI automation framework and how you can use it to automate iOS applications using Swift. We'll go with a quick introduction just to see what is this tool about. We'll talk about requirements, like what do you need to set up in order to use it. We'll go over the environment setup and as well as how to write the tests. It should be pretty straightforward. You won't need much coding knowledge. So if you're a manual tester and have never used automation tools before, don't worry. We'll be using some simple tools, so it will be pretty easy for everyone to get started. Okay, so let's go over the introduction. Okay, so a little bit more about XCUI framework. It's built by Apple, it's designed by Apple, it's been still maintained by Apple, which is great. So we get update fast. It's free since it's built in Xcode. It's fast and reliable. Like if you would compare it to any other tools, like maybe Appium or some others, you would notice that performance and the stability of tests written in XCUI is much better. And also why we choose this for our webinar today, it's easy. They have a built-in recorder, which allows everyone to get started without coding knowledge. A little bit more about specifications. So you can write tests in Swift or Objective-C, depends on your preference. I like Swift more, it's just more easy to follow. It supports real devices and as well as the simulators. We can use simulators in this webinar, and if you would like, we can also share some materials how you can set up those tests on real devices. And what's a good thing about it? You have a beautiful test reports produced in Xcode. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about requirements. Requirements are pretty straightforward. You should have macOS computer with you. Unfortunately, you cannot use your Windows laptop if you have it, since Xcode is not supported by any Windows or Linux operation systems at this moment. And you'll need iOS device or simulator. Simulator is built in Xcode, so if you just would like to test with simulators, you don't need anything in addition to it. Also, we're going to cover a few simple things such as Git. We'll need it to clone our project from our repository. We'll need to install Xcode. This is where we're going to write our tests and as well as execute. We'll need to have a little knowledge of Swift, but we'll go pretty easy using the recorder. So if you have experience at least with some coding, it should be pretty straightforward for you. And as well as the application, like what application we're going to test. So let's set up our environment. So as a first step, we'll need to download Xcode and Git if you don't have it yet. You can get it from App Store. You can get it from Apple Developer Portal. It's your preference. I suggest just to get it from App Center since it's easier and you will get updates. And as soon as you have it, you just need to open Terminal, clone the project, and you'll need to create the test target. We'll go over the entire process and I'll show you how you can do this. So it's just to provide an overview of you're going to see shortly. All right, so here you can see a quick demonstration of how we're going to create the test target. Test target is just in a kind of extension to the main application where we're going to write our tests. The specific about XCUI is that you need the source code access. So in the case if you would like to write any tests, you would need to ask the developers to provide you the access to the actual source code of the application, so you can add your tests there. All right, and we'll use Recorder in this session since it's the easiest way to get started. There are more advanced techniques which you can utilize to write those tests, such as Stability Inspector, allows us to inspect elements similar way how you do with Selenium tests in a Google Chrome console. But in this example, it should be pretty straightforward. It's kind of just recording different actions, and all the actions will be executed in the code, which we can use in our test. And as soon as we write our test, we'll just have to add assertions. Assertion would verify that expected element is displayed on the screen, or in some cases, you can add some additional assertions, such as validate that something does not exist on the screen, so something is nil, and so on. Depends on your test execution. All right, so let's get started with demo. So as the first thing that I'm going to do, I'll just go to my GitHub repo where I have my source code application, which we're going to test. And I'm going to clone develop branch. Let me just copy the snippet from GitHub, and I will open my terminal so I can clone the project. All right, so we have successfully cloned our project, and now we just have to open it so we can start writing our tests. Okay. So I navigated to my project directory. So I'm going to open it in Finder. And I'm gonna click on Xcode project file, so it will open it in an Xcode. Okay, we have our application open it in an Xcode. In this webinar, I'm using Xcode version 11.3. I think it's the latest that you can use. I always recommend to use latest Xcode so you can avoid any compatibility issues with Swift version. So let's just first of all see what our application is about so we can figure out what kind of tests we can automate. I'm gonna hit the play button so we can open our application. Okay, so we have our application open. It's pretty simple app which you can use to add a tracking for different players. Let's say you're playing the Monopoly with someone, and you would like to know how many points each of the player has. So for example, I'm gonna add Alex, and Alex has 1500 as a balance, and I'm gonna select an image, and I'm gonna add this player. So now we have this player, and I'm gonna add another one. So let's say Rob. And Rob also has 1500. And now we have two players, which we can add additional balance to. We can rename it, and as well as we can delete. Also, we have settings here, so we can control the currency, we can control default balance, quick add amount, and also sound settings. So it's a pretty simple application. In terms of tests, one of the obvious tests that you can execute here is to add a new player. Also, we can think about deleting the player, we can rename the player, or we can add additional amount. As you can see, if I add extra 200, balance is reflecting what we just added. So a lot of test cases that we can come up with. I'd say if we're going to write the regression test suite, we would like to make sure that everyone could add a player, everyone could manage the player, you can add the balance, and also you can delete players. And also we have a settings where we can start the new game. So if we start the new game, all the data being cleared out, and you start from the beginning. All right. So it's an application that we're going to test, and now we'll actually start with adding the test target for our test. So I'll just give a quick overview of the concept of application structure as well. So we have the main target, which we're using to run our application. So you can use it, and now we can create additional test targets for unit testing, for UI testing, and as well as we can create different extensions, as was mentioned before, for example, for TVO, so for watchOS application, and so on. So let me create our UI test target. I'm just gonna click on a file and click on new. And from here, I'm gonna select target. We have many different options in terms of target. I'll just type UI, and we'll create a UI testing bundle. Okay, we'll use a default name. Okay, don't forget your bundle ID when you'll be creating the application. It must be unique. In this case, I'll just use my last name, and it has to start with some prefix. So this is how it's going to look like. I'm going to select Swift. If you'll be using Objective-C, you can select Objective-C here. And here we can also specify which target we're going to test and what project is that. Okay. So you should see new folder added, Boardbank UI test, and there should be default file created as well. This is just default test sample produced by Xcode, just for us to understand how you should use it. So what we'll find here, we'll go over the structure in more details. We have our class, which is a main class that we're going to use to test the application. So we have the setup method. This setup method will be used before all the tests. All right, so yeah, now it should be more clear to follow. Setup method are going to be executed each time before we run any test. So please put all your, maybe cleanup methods or some additional parameters that you would like to execute before each test. In this case, we just have continue after failure set to false. It means that if you have any test failures, it will fail the test. You can set it to true, for example, if you have a different test scenario where you want to run tests regardless. We have a tear down method, which will be executed after your test execution. So for example, if you would like maybe do something with test reports, you would like to do some additional cleanup or something else, you can use this method. And here we have a test example, which we can use just to understand what we have to do here. In terms of structure of the test method, first of all, we have to declare the variable of the application, which is XCUI application. And then we have to launch the app. As soon as we've done all those steps, we can start writing our test. In this example, I will use a built-in recorder to write simple test here. So let me just copy and paste this function. And I'm going to try a new test, which I'm going to call test add new player. Please make sure to always have this test prefix. This is required by Xcode to be recognized as a test. So we will see it in a special tab. Okay, I'm gonna click this button and it will launch UI test recorder. Okay, I'm gonna click on add button and I'm gonna just click add player. And I should see the player added to my screen. And to get a locator, I will just tap on a player name. So we have the code in an Xcode. Okay. And at this point, I'll just stop recording and I will take this code and paste it into our functions that we just created. Okay, let's clean up this code a little bit. So we already have a declaration, so we don't need it. And let's just see what is this code that we have executed from our UI recorder. I see one more question about actually how you can get started with UI recorder. So let me show you once again how you can do this. It's kind of weird in the Xcode that this small button, it needs to be highlighted if you would like to execute it. So the way how it should work, you should just go to some test method and click on this button. And if you see record UI test text, you'll be able to launch your recorder. Okay, so here we have the app launch, and then we have app navigation bars, which equals to board bank, buttons, add, and this is our locator. And we're gonna use the function tab to actually press this button. Let me show you how it looks in the UI. So if you are familiar with structure of iOS application, so this is navigation bar, and here we just use button. So that's how you can read this code. It's pretty easy to follow, as you can see. It's not really complex, and in terms of like naming conventions, iOS made it pretty explicit to write those tests. And then we have app, tables, static text, add player, and also hit a tab on it. Let me show you what is this element. So this is just add player button, which we click to add the new player. Okay, so let me just run this code so we can see how it works. It should succeed, as we don't have any assertions added yet. Okay, test succeeded. And now we're gonna actually add a little bit more to this test, so it's more functional. Okay, so what we would like to do, we would like to create a new player, and we would like to make sure that this player was added to the screen. So I'll start a new game and just going to show you this test case manually once again, so you can better understand what we'll be testing. We're going to click plus button, then we're going to click add player button, and we'll make sure that this player was added to the screen. To do that, we already have code from recorder, which allows us to tap on all those buttons. And what we have to do, we have to add the assertion so we can ensure that element is displayed on the screen. I'm gonna use method which is called XCUI assert true. It takes a Boolean expression. So the way how we're gonna write this, we first of all gonna define the locator of the element, which we have to verify that it exists, and we'll use exist method to transform it into the Boolean expression. Okay, so as a first step, I will try to come up with a locator for this element. I'm going to remove the tab from here because we're not going to tap it. We just need to declare static variable, and tab would be void in this case. Okay. So we have our locator for the new player. And I'm going to copy this new player and add exists. So it would be Boolean expression. So now let's read our tests so we can see what we'll be testing. So first of all, we're gonna assign app to XCUI application. We're gonna launch the app. We will click on add button from navigation bar, and then we're going to click on add player button, and we will make sure that new player was added to the screen. I see one question from Marina in terms of locators. The best way, use accessibility ID, like in Appium. It's the best and most reliable locator which you can use. You will need to add those locators yourself, or sometimes you'll have to ask developers to add those accessibility labels, which could be sometimes time consuming. I'd say if you have clean code produced from your UI recorder by itself, like we can see here, it's pretty good. It would be easy and consistent to use accessibility labels, but in terms of like speed and reliability, you would have the same behavior if you'll be using accessibility labels, all those native locators that we have here. So let's see if our test pass. I'm gonna click this play button and we will execute our test. Okay, test succeeded. As we can see, we have added our player to the screen, and by using this assertion, we verified that it's been added to the screen. But let me try to break this test. Like, we want to make sure that if it's a different name, then it would actually fail. So I'll just change the name to, let's say, player one, and we'll see what happens. Tests have failed because it couldn't find the player one text label, which is expected because the player that we added has a different name, player. So it was the first step. As you can see, it was pretty straightforward to use UI recorder to get locators and as well as to tap all the buttons. And we just had to use one assertion in order to verify that element was added. Also, we'd like to show you that we can use the special tab available in Xcode. So you can group your tests into test suites. So in this case, we just have one test suite, but in your application, you usually have different test suites. For example, for different parts of your application. Let me just run entire test suite so we can see how it will work. So now I will write the entire test suite, and we'll see what will be the output. As you can see, the app is being reinstalled between each of the tests. Okay, it's currently testing the performance. That's why it's launching multiple times. Okay, test succeeded, and let me see what kind of output we have. Okay, we can see that there is no issues in this example. Testing was completed. Sometimes if you have some issues, you can use this console to debug and diagnose like what actually is broken in your test. Okay, so we have a simple test which we recorded using the UI recorder in Xcode. And now let's add some more complex tests using the same feature. But before we also move to the next feature, I noticed one thing about this app, that every time when we add the new players, like we have existing players added, which is not good in terms of testing. You would like to have clean state each time. There are multiple ways how you can do this. Xcode provides the functionality to clean the app data before each test. You can execute this in your setup method. But I'll just do a really simple thing. I'll just start a new game before we start writing any tests. So let me try to automate this test case, which will be executing before any test, so we can ensure the clean state of our application. I'm going to name our function create a new game, and we'll use recorder to capture all those actions. Okay, I'm going to click on settings button, and I'll click on a new game, and I'll accept this alert, and we have a new game started. So pretty straightforward. Let me stop the recorder, and we have duplicated declaration of this variable, so I'm just going to remove it. Okay, so we have our test function, which will start the new game. And what I'll do, I'll just add this test function in our setup method. So before we run any tests here, we'll run this test function. Alternatively, you can also do this by adding it to each test function. Let's say each test function may have different preconditions. For example, in order to add a new player, I need to ensure that there's no other players. For example, if you are testing changing the name, you would have a precondition of some player must exist. So I'll just add it here. And let me check some questions that you guys have. One question that Siri had asked: how do we stop looping the test execution? You can just click on this stop button, and it should abort all processes that are running currently. So just use this if you would like to stop your test execution. And I see another question about using the test recorder, and if this is a common practice in developers, in QA teams. I'd say usually it's a first step to get started. You can use recorder in any point of your career. If you're more comfortable writing your locators using different tools, it's fine. But if you just would like to get started with some tests, I recommend recorder because it would be much easier. And also, it's also the fastest way. If your application is written in a good way, that you have all the accessibility labels added, you can inspect it, and all elements have the proper description, it would be just pretty fast for you to use a recorder. And another question is how to get the element locator if we are not using the recording feature. It's a good question, and I think it's important to cover before we move to new tasks. So let me show you alternative way which you can use. We will use a developer tool, which is called Accessibility Inspector. It's built in Xcode. Okay, so we have our Accessibility Inspector, and I'm gonna select which application I would like to inspect. Okay, so we have our simulator, and from here, I should be able to see the app which will be running. Let me rerun our application so it will show up here as well. Okay, so as you can see, we have highlighted an element which we're going to test. So from here, you can see what kind of actions we have and label if it exists. In this case, we don't have a label. And you can also perform an action from here, and it will be reflected on your screen. So you can use Accessibility Inspector to get actual element description. And similar way, if you have used Selenium in the past, we can see all elements here from the view. And we can use all those locators in our test as well. So as you can see here, we have all different definitions for buttons, for header, and as well as for text. And the way how the framework works, so for example, first of all, we have to select where we would like to locate an element. So in the case of navigation bars, it's always the same navigation bar, which is a board bank. And here we'll just go like button. And what is the text of the button? In this case, it's add. If you would like to verify that some text was added, you can just use static text and specify which text you're looking for. And it all goes to specifics of iOS development. So we have different UI elements here, such as collections views, we have tables and so on. So you would just have to select element and go in more details by specifying explicitly which element you'll be using. It's a bit more complex. So in this webinar, I'll continue using our recorder as its easiest option. And I'd say, in my experience with XCUI recorder in general, it has pretty good output. Like if you have a clean code like this, it's fine. It should be reliable enough. And you can use inspector if you would like to get a better locator in some cases. So usually locator will capture the best possible locator for the element if possible. Let's see how our test will look like if we're gonna add the new game before our test. So let me run it. Okay, so we started the new game, and as you can see, the new test that we are running is starting from the clean state. So there are two ways you can place it into setup function. So it would be executed for all tests as a precondition. In my example, I just would like it to run it for this test. So let me just make a note. All right, so we have our test written with precondition defined, where we can launch the app and as well as execute our test and ensure that element was added. So as a next step, I would like to do something more complex, and I actually would like to assign a custom name to our player name, so we can test one more feature, which is defining a name for our player. And by the way, all this stuff we can also move out of this function if it's being executed in all different functions. But in this webinar, I just want to write it a quick way, so we won't be doing much work into like fixing the syntax of the code and really worrying about the code guidelines. Okay, I'm going to name our test function create new user with custom name. It's a good practice to be explicit in our test functions in terms of what we're doing. So usually just try to name it the same way as you would write the title of your test case. So we have some common code here, like to execute our test, which I'm going to show you now. We'll have to also type on add button. We'll have to click on this text field. We're going to type test, and we're going to click add player. So we can use most of this code, including assertion. In your tests, when you have some same elements, we can just take it out of our function and declare it in a class. Or you can create a screen objects, which is a preferred way of doing this. But to do this faster, I'll just copy this code into our new function so we can save some time. So I'm gonna type the new line of the code, which will be responsible for changing the name. But besides that, it would be the same test. So we selecting add button, we adding the new player, and we want to make sure that this new player is added. So let me just write the code how we can type the text into our text field. I will use recorder for that. So let me click add, and I'm gonna type on our text field. Sometimes it's not pre-selected, so it's a better practice to tap on it, and I'm gonna type test, okay? So let me stop the recorder. We have selected text field from tables view. We don't need to tap on it all the time, but in this time, I'll just do it to make it more reliable. And as soon as we tapped on this, I would like to type text. Okay, so we're gonna type test, and I would like to make sure that name matches what will be displayed on the screen. So here I'm just gonna change the player to the test. Let's run our test. So we have a test failure. It looks like it couldn't actually tap on it. So let me just comment this line, and we'll see if it fixes the issue. As you can see, if something isn't working, Xcode will tell you right away. So it's pretty easy to debug. Okay, and you see if we're not tapping on this element, then it's not actually getting pre-filled. So let's try to debug this a little bit more. Okay, we can see what actually happened here. In our Xcode console, we have an error description, which means that one element couldn't be matched. Let's try to fix it. So we tapping on our text field, and then we typing the text here. Let me see how we can fix it and then debug this as well. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'll use first match method to see if it's just an issue that it's seeing multiple elements here. Okay, let's run our test. Could be an issue with like some existing data. So one of the good practices that you can also do while writing your test, you can reinstall the application to ensure that you are starting with the clean data. Oh, and I got a good suggestion from Sergey that we just forgot to tap the button, and that's a problem. Okay, so let me just copy and paste this code from here. Actually, I think we have a different issue here. Okay, so we're launching the app. We're clicking on Add button. Here we find the text field. We're typing the text, and we're adding the new player, and then we will verify that this player was added. Okay, so it fixes an issue. We just didn't have our actions in the correct places. So it's important just before you run the test to go through the code and understand what you actually got from the recorder. So we added the test, how you can add the custom name, and I'll just show you an example. For example, if we will look for different name and if it will fail or not. Okay, it failed as expected, as the name is not matching the one that we have just created. Okay, so we have created two tests, how you can add a player with default name, and as well as how you can add the player with custom name. In terms of additional tests, you can also try to delete the player. You can rename it or add extra amount to the balance. And also we can verify the settings. There much more work that we'll have to do here. We'll have to clean up all this code to assign proper locators, and as well as to define our test functions so we can reuse a lot of the code. Let me try to make our test class a little bit better so it would be much easier for developers and testers to understand what we're doing here. So I'm going to remove unused code. And as you can see, we have our locators used in different places. So I'm just gonna take it out of this function. So as you can see, we added our add button as a class variable. We got an error as the app is not defined. So let me clean up this code a little bit more so we can fix this error as well. Okay, error is fixed, and let me do the same for other locators too. And I will clean up all our tests. And I see some questions that I would like to answer as well. So we have a question from Arsen about page objects. Yes, page object is a preferred way how you would write this. And you can check out the in banners by the end of this webinar, you'll get the access to my GitHub repository where you can see how you can implement test objects for the same application. In this GitHub repository, you'll find a more structured way how to write all those tests, how to implement screen objects, and as well as how you can run the tests in real devices and simulators, and how you can integrate it into your CI pipeline as well. So it's just a little bit more advanced stuff, so I'm not covering this in this webinar. Okay, so we have created locators for a few more elements, and let's see what else we can refactor here. Okay, looks like we're using this guy in a few places as well. Okay, so we did some refactoring, and now let's make sure that our test will pass. So I'm gonna replace the old code with new locators that we just have created. Okay, so we have refactored our test create new game function. As you can see, it looks much cleaner. And let's do the same with other functions as well. So we have the add button, which we declared as add button. And we also have an add player button. Okay, we don't need this code anymore. And also we're using the app launch in a few places. So I'm just gonna move this to the setup. I got a question from Irina if we can move our declaration to the function. You can do this as well. Yeah, there's no real preference in terms of like where you're gonna place this. So here, okay. So we moved our XCUI application to the setup, and we moved our web app launch to the setup, and now our test should be much cleaner. Okay, so and let me refactor our additional test as well. So here we have all this code. Okay, and one thing that we didn't create a special locator for is for the text field. So let me implement this locator as well. Okay, we just refactored all our tests. Let me see, looks like we have fixed one more error. Okay, all tests been refactored. So now let me just make sure that everything is still passing. And I'm going to remove this test launch performance method, as we're not covering the performance testing in this tutorial. Okay, everything passed, so our refactoring was successful. I'll just summarize what we did. So in this webinar, we created our test target. So we can write UI tests using the XCUI. We created test locators, which we're using in our test functions. And in our test functions, we automated 3 tests, which is test to create a new game, test on how to add the new player, and also test on how to add the player with the custom name. That's everything that you need to know to get started to write tests. There's some advanced concepts that you can use, like page objects, integration to the CI pipeline, and as well as writing more complex tests. In this case, our application is quite simple, so it's not interacting with the server at all. But I hope it was clear enough for you to understand like how to actually start writing tests without even coding knowledge. All right. So before we turn our screen back to Julia, please let me know if you have any questions about what we just discussed, so I can answer some. Question from Marina about limitation of XCUI tests compared to the Appium. Actually, there is no limitations, and the way how Appium works under the hood, Appium is using XCUI test driver. So basically, Appium is a wrapper around XCUI test. So whenever you write your Appium tests, let's say in Ruby, in Java, in Python, actually it's just translating all this code into the JSON wire protocol, and then it's being executed with the native test driver, which is XCUI test in this example. One more question about handling of testing app notifications, setting GPS, and other things where we have some external dependencies. Yes, it's possible. You can even call Siri from the XCUI test. So there are a lot of possibilities how you can automate this. In terms of using the GPS, it could be more complex, and you'll have to work a little bit more about like setting up preconditions. And same applies to notifications. There's a way like you can interact with entire screen. You can interact not just with application, you can interact with everything what you can see on the screen. So it's totally possible. But I would just say that you know, some of the tests could be more flaky to automate. So it's better to keep your tests you know, more simple and reliable. And I'll just answer one more question from Igor. Can we automate application without the source code if we'll be using just an IPA file? Yes, you can do this with Appium, but unfortunately with XCUI, you need the source code access. You need to use Xcode to write everything. So even though Appium is using XCUI methods to execute all the tests, it's a big difference between them that you actually need access to the source code of the application. And a question from Arsene, in terms of reporting tools, yes, you can get it from Xcode directly. If you're using some additional tools, such as, like, for example, FastLane, you can get HTML reports, and as well as you can get any other type of reporting tools. And you can integrate everything into your CI system as well. It all depends on your use case. And one more question from Irina. What is it better to use, real devices or simulators? Simulators could be easier because you don't need to purchase the hardware for testing. In terms of reliability, I'd say if you want to test compatibility, it's better to use real devices. If you just would like to test functionality, simulators are good enough. But usually, even if you select different simulators, like different models, different iOS system versions, you will get the same results in most of the cases. So if you would like to ensure that your app runs on all supported environments, it's better to use real devices. All right. So looks like we covered most of the questions, and I'll turn it back to Julia.
Yes, Maxim, thank you very much for your perfect presentation. And I also have some questions. And the first one is going to be how to integrate tests into the CI pipeline.
Oh, that's a good question. So to do this, it depends on your CI setup, but you'll have to run your tests not using the UI, but you'll have to use a terminal command to run those tests. It's quite simple. If you'll check out some of my tutorials on Medium, you'll find out that you can just execute it with Xcode command. So you can take this command, integrate it into your CI pipeline. For example, you have a test stage of your pipeline, and if the tests have passed, it will pass. If not, it will fail your pipeline.
All right. Can we run these tests in parallel?
Yeah, you can. Xcode supports it by default, so you can execute it across of different simulators. For example, if you would like to test compatibility, and also it's possible with real devices as well, which is really good if you would like to execute more tests and ensure that you test with all supported environments. And test performance is pretty good if you would compare this to Appium or any other tools.
Sounds good. And how it's different from the Appium tests?
Appium is using XCUI test under the hood, as we discussed already. So it's just a better and faster way to write those tests because there's just less interaction with this on-wire protocol and other functions that Appium is using to run those tests. So reliability, I would say the first thing. One disadvantage that some QA testers might find that you need a source code access, which is not always available for QA testers.
Thank you very much. Guys, do you have more questions to Maxim? If you don't mind, Maxim, I'm gonna share something with the participants. I will use my 5 minutes, all right? Guys, I'm gonna use my opportunity and share with you that we're gonna have, let me see. Okay, I'm inviting all of you to join our Java Selenium Automation course at QA Turbo School. We start new course on April 20th, and during this course, you will learn how to build automation framework from scratch. The duration of this course is 3 months, and normally we have classes on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 3 times per week. Also, you will get homework, and what is most important, we provide phone screenings, interview screenings, and run exclusive webinars with QA professionals. For those of you who are interested in learning automation, 3 reasons why to choose QA Turbo School. First one is personal mentoring. Each student will be under personal mentoring. It means every home task will be checked. You will get constant feedback from your mentor, and you will get feedback on your code and learning process. Second reason, I think this is very valuable, is individual sessions with students. You know, especially during this situation with virus and everything, lots of people lost their jobs, and it's very important, you know, to be motivated and keep learning. That is why we provide individual sessions for those students who experience difficulties or impediments, blockers in their learning process. So our mentor is always ready to help and you know, to run private session with particular student and to keep you motivated. And the third reason, exclusive interview trainings. As I mentioned, market right now is very demanding, and lots of QA professionals gonna searching for new jobs right now. And of course, you need to be, you know, to be confident. We have developed a unique system how to pass any level of automation interviews, and we have a team of QA professionals who will train you, and you will have a private sessions with them. Also, we provide Udemy course, lots of podcasts with real automation interviews, only real, and lots of PDF documents and different information. Now, you know, results of our students speaks for themselves, and we are very proud of our students who are currently working at such giants as Microsoft, Monsters, and Apple. Yay, recently we've got a new job offer. Our student got a new job offer in Los Angeles at Apple, and we are 100% happy for her. Now, what you're gonna get after our Java Selenium Automation course? After the course, first, you will learn how to write automation framework from scratch. Second, you will gain skills and knowledge on how to pass any level of automation interview on your own. Attention, on your own. It means we're not going to give you just, you know, like PDF documents and videos. No, we want you to be ready and confident, you know, to any level of interview. Once you graduate your course, you know, we want you to be successful. So we train you to be successful during interviews. Next, finally make a career change and get lots of benefits of being automation engineer. In current situation, without any words and doubts, you guys know how important it is to be qualified, to be professional, and to prove that the company needs you. So here we provide all this knowledge, and you can see testimonials and reviews on our website, www.qaturbo.com, and you can see that our students, they are professionals, and they have work, and they changed their life, and the last one start living the life you were always dreaming about. I mean, obviously automation engineers get lots of benefits, and it's different money. I'm pretty sure if you get less than 85K, it's probably the best time to think how to change it. And for those of you who are interested in joining us, please contact us at admin@qaturbo.com, and we will send you a detailed plan with all the information, and we can set up a phone calls with you to discuss more details. So please let me know, admin@qaturbo.com. All right, that was my part. I'm very happy because, you know, right now everyone is looking for opportunities to learn more, you know, to to get jobs because of this situation. Any recommendations, suggestions, tips before we end the session?
In terms of maybe, you know, some like automation tips or, you know, just general QA career tips, I'd say is that you should start with automation if you haven't yet. If you're a manual tester and you would like to start doing something more exciting, if you would like to start getting a higher salary and just get, you know, closer to developers, automation is a must. I feel like the industry is changing dramatically. Like maybe like a couple years ago, you could have get a job with just manual skills, but now you need to have some understanding of the coding and just know how the system works. So I'd say be more technical and you know, learn more.
Learn more. All right, guys, all participants, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much for your time. We are happy you joined us, and we will have more sessions coming very soon. Maxim, thank you very much again for participation. I think this is time to say goodbye to everyone, since we do not have more questions and already shared all the details, right?
Yep. Thank you for having me, and yeah, have a good one.
Thank you. All right, guys, goodbye. Thank you very much. We see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.